All right, I guess we can start by introducing ourselves, what we do, and like a short sentence of where we're at today in this crazy world.
Okay, hello, my name is Adrian and I manage Reprezent Radio, which is to be found in Brixton, South London. And we work with loads of young people to start radio careers. At the same time doing a broadcast that's super energetic and hopefully people enjoy.
My name is Charlie Dark. I'm a DJ and radio broadcaster, and I'm founder of an organisation known as the Run Dem Crew. Essentially what we do is we bring people together to explore cities under the cover of darkness at night and help each other to be the best that they can be. I'm also a yoga teacher.
My name's Amy. I work on a project called Future Bubblers, which is part of the Giles Peterson and Brownswood music family, and we mentor kind of like left field experimental talent in the very grassroots stages of their career. And I also manage 2 artists, Yasmin Lacey and Ezra Collective, in my spare time.
I'm Eunice Obianaga, and I'm the founder and director of Enspire Management, which is a project and events management consultancy, and we work with music, culture, entertainment, and anything from conferences, televised shows, you name it, the full gauntlet, just really trying to work with great organisations. I'm also chairwoman of an amazing charity called Small Green Shoots. As you know, you've corroborated the fact that they are amazing, thank you. And I work on lots of different cultural projects, both here in the UK and Nigeria as well.
Cool, amazing people. Tony Wachiku, I'm a music producer, educator, and I head up CDR, Create, Define, Release, which is a community and a platform for new music and ideas, and allowing a space for producers to kind of be themselves and take those risks that the industry doesn't allow. I'm also a board member of Resident Advisor as of almost a year now, which has been interesting. That's me.
I mean, everyone used the word community in some form or fashion. So let's start there. And Tony, you can start and say, like, what does that word mean to you and your kind of role within it?
Sure. So fundamentally, community means to me that is human beings who are together and work on a project or an idea or cause, something that drives them, and work on it together in some semblance. And I see myself as, first and foremost, a participant in community. My community, I see my community as people who are very much interested in pushing Black music forward and taking those risks using digital technology. That's my thing. But I also see myself as a facilitator in that space. As far as CDR was created as a response to the music industry and a response and to create an opportunity where producers and artists can have a safe environment to be themselves and take risks that the industry doesn't allow. And that very much was from some of my experiences in the music industry. But I also see myself as a facilitator because, when you're connected to music, both from a creative point of view, but also from a cultural point of view, it's something that sticks with you for the rest of your life. And, you're on this kind of journey, from, my case, as someone who's a fan of music to someone who became a musician, became a producer, and then obviously set up a company. But music has always been at its root. So my relationship to community and relationship to that has come from someone who's been a participant, someone who's also a facilitator and supports keeping this community going, and being mindful of what it takes to keep the community going.
Yes.
I like this word community, actually. When we're thinking about this conversation, I was like, I really like this word. I think for me, community is a place where people can learn and grow and connect around similar interests. I think that it allows people to realise who they are as well, because when you're in isolation, it's very easy for you to think you know who you are, but it's only when you're in community with other people and they rub you up the wrong way, they make you happy, you start realising who you are. So I think, communities, it's important. I think my role within it is being somebody that's a connector and somebody that enables those communities to be the best that they can. And I think to also be somebody that helps represent the interests of those communities as well. So a lot of my work has been around music, young people, Black people, and African culture as well, and how I can enable their voices to be heard, really. So I kind of see that's my role within community.
Thank you.
I was thinking about this question a lot as well. And I think community to me is it's very much a sense of feeling seen and feeling heard when you maybe haven't had that opportunity before. And I think a lot of these, using the word community to me, I associate a lot with the term kind of like subcultures and how these little kind of like pockets of people that have these similar interests and kind of similar experiences sometimes naturally gravitate towards each other, but sometimes they need these kinds of, these pockets and these opportunities to come together. And I feel like, Future Bubblers, the project that I work on, is very much, we identified this kind of, this lack of opportunity to find your community in areas, especially outside of London. So a lot of the work that we do is identifying, pockets or potential pockets of young people that are making more experimental music outside of London that don't have a lot of the, I guess the opportunities or the gateways that we have in the capital city of the country. So it's about taking those things there physically in the literal sense, like putting on workshops, hosting events, and, just kind of being physically present on the ground so they can have this kind of physical space to actually come together and then identify similar experiences, similar problems, similar obstacles, and then work together to kind of navigate those and keep things moving forward and keep things innovating.
For me, community is a word that is not a buzzword. It's a truth. It's not a marketing plan, because I think the word community is being co-opted by brands. And personally, for myself, my understanding and need to be part of community and place as a leader of a community changed because of the pandemic. And so now I would say that community doesn't mean very much to me, but movements do. Because I think it's really important that when you bring people together, whereas before it was enough to just bring people together to be, as part of this community that was part of a bigger group, now that community has to be empowered. It has to be a movement. It has to have a direction. I think it has to be very diligent that it works to get to a place where it's self-sufficient. So it's not reliant on anyone else other than the people who are within it. Because I think the pandemic showed that when that outside support pulls out, then, communities fragment like asteroid fields.
Mm.
Yeah,
it's a good word to use in orbits. Asteroid fields.
God, it's hard after everyone's given really good definitions. You suddenly sit there going, I can't match it. You're all correct. I completely agree with everyone. Like from my side, like running a radio station that's licensed, we have a community license. And so the word always kind of had a bit of a stigma to me, because it was almost like saying if you've got a community license, it's not as good as a proper license. And so I think I've made a lot of peace with the word over the last few years, because now I'm quite happy to say we've got a community license. Like I don't think it's got a negative connotation to it anymore, because like over the years we became really good as a radio station. So yeah, the word kind of doesn't have that for me. But yeah, I guess there's two communities. There's the things you're interested in and the things that are innate in you. And at the radio station, it's a mixture of both for sure, but it's the music community is just so tight. Like everyone is so passionate about it, about music, that it becomes such a powerful little force. So yeah.
What's the kind of balance between, like, I guess, the Reprezent of online and then the real physical space in Brixton and being in London and it being 2022? Like, how do you balance the two things? Like, are you catering to what's happening in the outside world, or is so much of your energy like doing the physical part of being in Brixton?
Doing the physical part
mm-hmm.
is probably like 90% most important. Like what goes out on air is what goes out on air, and it's great. We love it. What goes on in the building, I wish that went out on air because it's just, it's hilarious. Like, you know, like it's a real privilege to be in a building with a load of young people that are just so hell bent on making things. You know, like we had, so many of the young people were like, right, I want to do this on my show. I need to buy all these props and need to film it. And I just sit there just thinking, you're all insane, but it's brilliant. Go for it. So yeah, it's what goes on in the building is most important to me. I think that's I guess the proper community.
You have to ask me the question again.
I guess like what the balance is between like the Run Dem Crew of the internet and the Run Dem Crew of the real.
I mean, I think reality versus perception. That's like the heart of the music industry, isn't it? Yeah. Smoke and mirrors. I think, you know, the reality of the situation is I don't want to run a running club. You know, I want to run an organisation that stands up for and stands for something, and also informs where fitness and well-being is going. That's my mission. I think, you know, the balance is basically some people just want to be part of it because it's a popular thing to be part of, and they just want to run with some other people. What I do realise is kind of whenever you bring people together, you almost do yourself a disservice if you don't push those people into the light to really make that, you know, the fact that you've managed to get this community together to really be as effective and, you know, to really use the power that you've got of all these different people. Because I think a lot of times it's kind of, we're part of these communities and we don't realise how connected and powerful these communities are because it's something we've either grown up with or it's just like, oh, that's my mate, you know, until you're talking to someone else who's like, oh my God, you know, blah, blah, blah. You're like, yeah, he's just the dude, you know what I mean? So I think for me, it's all about kind of, you know, really instilling something in people that it's not just enough to be part of the community. You can't just turn up and be seen in the pictures. You've got to be contributing energy because otherwise that energy soon dissipates after a while.
You're going to rephrase it?
Yeah, definitely. I'm rephrasing it for everyone. So I guess what you work on, there's so many different things as your collective and Yasmin Lacey, Future Bubblers, and then the wider Brownswood infrastructure. The first thing that comes into your head in the morning when you think about stuff, is it, you know, putting something on social media? Is it, you know, the real life workshops? Is it like how do you kind of balance all these things in your head? Like what becomes like the highest priority action?
I think all of the things that I work on, for me personally, like the thing that keeps me motivated every day, it is very much the human connection. Like I'm not an online person, like I'm a technophobe on everything. Like I don't, you know, can barely do not disturb on my phone, all that kind of stuff. But the thing, I feel like online, and especially, you know, post-pandemic, Zoom madness, it's become much more necessary. And I think there are benefits. It allows you to reach more people and it plays that purpose. But for me, it's all of the conversations that I have, all of the work that comes from it is all generated from human connection. I couldn't imagine a job where I didn't have, you know, like a human conversation with someone or meet with them physically and talk about stuff and just have I feel like when you do stuff online, it's very kind of intentional. And I feel like the human kind of connections allow that space to just have ideas and to react in the moment. And I think a lot of the work that I do online is kind of like for a very set purpose, or it's very intentional to achieve X, Y, Z goal. But none of that would be possible without the core human connection every day. So like I love just having the random hour phone call with Femi from Ezra Collective and just dealing with what comes from that conversation. It's not, you know, I don't have a list of like, we're trying to achieve this with this conversation. It's just like, where's your head at? You know, how are you feeling about this? And then we make a plan, which might have an online form as a reaction. But it's the soul of it. Do you know what I mean? I couldn't do it if it was just this online thing all day long.
I've got a slight spin. I agree with you, but I've got a slight spin on what you're saying. I think you nailed it when you said it's about human connection. But on your question, for me, it doesn't matter what it is. So the question about balance for me is kind of don't want to say irrelevant, but that's not it. It's about the human connections, especially from my world where my job is to bring people together in one way, shape or form. And obviously during the pandemic, we couldn't do that. So how else can you make a human connection? So for me, it's not necessarily about the form. It's about ensuring that you actually touch people and that you communicate with people. And that could be a phone call, it can be a Zoom, it can be in real life where I'm touching you guys, but we are still just having that connection in some way. The depth of connection, I think, is where that the conversation as to, is it a phone call or should it be online or what is it, is that's what that is about. But I think ultimately community done any form is important, and it's about human connection. Yeah, that's my thought on that.
I'm going to triple that one, human connection. But, you know, I'm also going to have a look at it from a slightly different perspective. So I think for me, as far as CDR is concerned, but even me personally, I have had a really weird relationship with online, because CDR started off as a response to the music industry, as I said earlier. And its real growth and development came from people being in a room, listening to music on a great sound system, like real people, you know, bringing tracks down that you're working on. You know, I'll get the tracks, I'll play it, you're hearing it at Plastic People or wherever it was, and then seeing people's reactions to music, or heads moving, or, you know, seeing whatever head nod was right, you know, in that time, seeing people respond to music, but also seeing the producer or the artist, seeing how other people react. That's priceless, right? And for me, CDR has always been that place where it's about a group of people together listening to music as it's developing and the relationships that come from that. So you know, and CDR has been around for 20 years. So it's been around since the days of MySpace, if anyone can remember MySpace, etc. And, you know, and I think for me, it's this idea of being in a room with people and seeing relationships burgeon with human beings in the room has always been something really special. And this online thing has been almost like this add-on, you know. But as the internet has become more and more important, and we've seen things go from MySpace to SoundCloud, and from MyCloud, you know, MyCloud, probably should be MyCloud, SoundCloud to the next one, obviously, and there's generations of people who have, you know, who have access to music and utilize online as their, you know, initial platform. For me, it's been interesting seeing how CDR has had to respond to that, you know, in that, you know, for a lot of us who are Gen 1 or Gen 2 CDR, it's all about being in a room with people, but then you suddenly got to respond to this idea of being online and the role that online plays. And of course, there are advantages to, you know, having access to many more people online from different communities and different places. But I also think that there's something lost in the fact that being in a room with people and seeing people's physical responses, both in terms of recipient, but also participant, there's something really beautiful about that. So for me, over the years, I've kind of looked at how CDR utilizes the internet as a tool, right? And try to, you know, work out how to still keep this idea of, I won't call it exclusive, but try and create intimacy online in a way that's how CDR is, as this intimate, special experience that is our lifelong memories in being in that realm, and working out how to do that online. So we're still thinking about the best way to model an in-person experience online, but, you know, which is one thing we're working on, but also this idea of obviously informing people using Instagram or whatever tool just to let people know what we're doing. First of all, as a communication channel, hey, we're doing this session in this city or this venue or whatever, but also to almost like use it as a way to kind of, you know, have some kind of visual reporting so that people can have an insight into what we're doing, but ultimately encouraging people to try and be in the room, wherever you are.
Thank you. I'm going to bounce around now, so we're not going to follow left to right, and feel like free to punch in. I feel like that's a warm-up question. Everyone's like suitably like spoken.
You know, there was a point, right, in when pandemic started and everyone was on Zoom. And it all felt really unnatural, but you got to see everyone's rooms. Yeah. And it was really important. It's like, oh shit, I really need to kind of put my laptop here, so the guitar's in the background. And everyone was really concerned about it. And there was something human about that. And then it got to a point where everyone's background just went to like a blank background. And it was like,
Agreed.
You know, it was funny. I was just thinking about that it lost a little bit of its humanity.
Yeah, absolutely.
When everyone suddenly hid. what their backgrounds were.
And it was really, equally, it was really, really powerful seeing that, you know, we all know that moment where everyone was transitioning online, and then you can see like kids walking in the background or people in their pajamas at a board meeting. Do you know what I mean? You know, you're trying to pitch to a investor, but you're in your, you know, your CACs or whatever. Do you know what I mean? But it was okay. It was okay. Do you know what I mean? And I think there was something really human, as you're saying, about just focusing on what needs to be said, rather than the essentially faff, visual faff. Actually, tell me what I need to hear, you know, or let's discuss what needs to be discussed, regardless of this kind of like backdrop of how we look or what we're wearing, kind of thing. Yeah. At least for a moment.
Yeah, I think it was a really important time because, particularly for young people, because I think what it did is it allowed people an insight into people's process. Because you've got to see the creative spaces, like whether they're like super billionaire, super producer, or you know, or whoever they were, you kind of got this look into the space where they create their art, and then also a kind of an insight into the mindset of how they create it and who they're friends with. So I thought, like, you know, the D Nice thing was really interesting. D Nice, he's he was part of a crew called Boogie Down Productions with KRS-One back in the day, and then he started. When that all kind of went belly up, he actually retrained as a photographer, but he had this like producer side, so that kind of led him into the DJing. But and he's been DJing, but hadn't really been like smashing it. And then on the pandemic, he basically went live from his house, and there's like 3 million people watching it.
Wow!
And there's all these legends and icons in the chat room, and it was. But what I thought was really interesting about that is I know that they had a private group that they were doing that with anyway.
Okay.
Pre-pandemic. So it was almost kind of like the seeds had already been planted for this listening group that then got shared with a much wider audience. And I thought that was really special because I think what it did is it kind of made people realise the importance of music. And there was an appreciation of music that I think had been missing before the pandemic.
Like we're just like consuming, endlessly consuming without like the human side.
Yeah, I think it just made people reevaluate the role of community in pandemic, because I think what's happened over the years is as the technology's got more powerful, the communal music making space has disappeared. That's something that I really miss. And so I think it's kind of like people almost kind of got to this thing where like, well, people are just making music by themselves, but actually I think being allowed into the process allowed you to kind of realise, oh, actually there was all these other different people who are involved in that process, and actually being part of a community is really important if you want to make music.
Mm-hmm. Well, you started at the beginning saying, you know, brands have kind of co-opted this word of community, but what is the perfect brand collaboration, community way of doing things? Not perfect, but have you worked on something where you felt a company's come in and gone, you know what, you see what we do, and it sit together and kind of work? Has that happened for you yet?
Yeah, I mean, if I look at my work with Run Dem and the work we've done with various different sports brands, so we've been with Nike, we've worked with Adi, we've worked with Asics, and you know, I'm currently like a global ambassador for Lululemon. And so one of my reasons for kind of going with Lululemon is actually they're one of the few brands that I've worked with who are interested in empowering the individual, so that actually they can then step away from the relationship, but you can carry on the work. So, for example, even if we go back to pandemic, it's kind of like, they're like, okay, so do you need a counselor? Do you need a business advisor? Do you need a life coach?
Wow.
You know, you're like, I guess I kind of do if I'm going to get through this period of time. And that's just really, that's really special. I think it's really important when if you have an idea and you're looking to partner with a brand, that you actually work with the brand that's the right one for what you need, not what you think what you want. So we all gravitate towards the biggest brands because a lot of us have grown up in the hood. And so there are certain brands that, if I put this on my feet or if I work with this brand, there's a kudos that I will get back when I return back to the ends. That's actually maybe not necessarily the right brand for what you need to kind of really get your project into where it really needs to go. And so I'm always kind of like the ones that empower you and are interested in you and the work you do outside of the work you do with them.
Yeah.
Because they realise that's just as important.
Adrian, you've done quite a lot with Reprezent, and I guess like a lot of the companies that you've worked with, they might not partner with any other community station or radio station, period. So what has been like the approach like from organisation? What is the ask usually from Reprezent?
God, that's a good question. We live in a capitalist society, right? So the brand work is going to happen. One of the presenters at Rep a few years ago, well, more than a few years ago now, maybe 5 years ago, came up to me and he was like, the problem is that you're Gen X working in a millennial environment. And I was like, wow, that's so true. And so it was kind of at that point that I opened the door to working with brands. And, there's been some amazing collaborative experiences and a couple not so great. But on the whole, it's been pretty positive. And it's okay, change the word brand to human, an individual. There's someone working there. So when you work with a brand, you are working with a human. And when you find that person that actually understands what you are about and also what your organization, what your project is about, like it can go so well. Like back in 2017, we did a few shows for Beats One, which is obviously now Apple Music. And like the individual in charge worked with me for about 4 years. There was no money. It was just phoning me up every few months going, you all right? What's going on? Like, what's Rep up to? And just genuinely interested in what we were doing. And so when the opportunity came along to actually do something in collaboration, like it was so smooth and so easy because we all knew each other. And so that actually felt like a brand collaboration rather than buying authenticity off the shelf, which is the other side of brand work. And it's, that's not to denigrate it because that's the world of advertising. But yeah.
Can I ask a question? Yeah. Just off the top of my mind. Who's more powerful, the brand or the community?
Community, each and every single time, definitely. The illusion is that the brand is more powerful, but the community is definitely more powerful. Definitely.
God, I'm on the fence, man.
No, I just think, this is the thing. I think a lot of times what happens is a community works with a brand and goes into the conversation from the beginning being like, we can't make this happen unless the brand is involved.
And that's why I'm asking the question, because that always feels like the approach from communities and that it's, oh, please help us. But actually, if you think about community and what we're talking about and that it's a mass of people with an interest, there's a lot of power there, but I don't think we always harness it in that way, or we don't always approach brands, or brands don't always see us in that way as well. So
I think they'll be the ones that don't have the longevity or the ones that just fall apart. Do you know what I mean? It's the long-standing ones that you can tell there's been that kind of like mutual respect from the beginning. Because I can tell, like when, with my artist manager hat on, when brands like approach us, you can see the copy and paste email. They've got that hit list. Sometimes they forget to change the name. Like it's embarrassing. And those ones are never going to resonate with the artist. And a lot of the time, we'll have conversations, managed to artists about what are the brands that you would love to work with and why. Like what's the specific thing that you'd like to get out of that relationship that will be different from this other one. And, a lot of the things that we've worked on that have been really fruitful and really like mutually beneficial have come from, happening to meet someone at a gig and they happen to work for XYZ brand, rather than me just sitting there waiting in my inbox for this person to send me their copy and paste email with this many Instagram posts for this much money, for this many, do you know what I mean? It's just, you can just see it a mile off. So, I mean, it's a difficult conversation, I think, to have with artists as well, because, in this day and age, especially where there's like, live music's still a little bit rocky, deals is a whole other conversation. But so brand work is super important, and it's like, it can become a bit bread and butter kind of feeling for a lot of artists, especially when they're out of campaign and stuff. So I just make a conscious decision is when I get these opportunities that come, I always remove the financial from the beginning and just talk about it as a kind of like, how would this feed your soul? How does this play into the bigger picture? Then we drop the pound bomb and then we see how they like, you know, run together. But it can never really, I think when you're going for that, just like the pound signs and the, you know, that like you were saying, that feeling of we need this to make this happen, you just have this kind of like desperation energy, and that never really leads anywhere positive.
And the audience knows as well.
Yeah,
like
they
the
can
audience
see
knows
through it.
like what you would do and wouldn't do, and when they're being advertised to, and no one wants to feel advertised to in this way.
I think one thing that's really important to say is when you are looking to work with your brand, you've got to work with the brands that understand the dynamics of your community, because a lot of problems arise sometimes when a brand gets involved, and they might just be like, oh, you two look really good in the product, but you don't. So we're going to deal with you. And immediately then you've got a problem on your hands, you know, particularly when you're dealing with young people as well. And suddenly it's kind of like that, you know, an outsider has come in, and now divide and conquer has started to happen within your thing.
They shouldn't be steering you either. They shouldn't be steering you.
Yeah, definitely.
It's interesting because I think for me, one of the earliest things to understand when working with brands is that you're dealing with marketeers and the marketeer mindset. You know what I mean? And understanding that ultimately their job is to sell a product or a concept or a culture, and you're just part of that picture. You know, so I think for me, you know, the relationship with brands has been one that's been bittersweet initially, because, you know, there's been times when brands have sniffed around to do like a collaboration or a brand initiation or whatever, and you're dealing with one person, as you said, but once it's clear that, you know, they only want that person or they want access to that tier one person, and it's actually not about what you're trying to do, the bigger picture, then it doesn't work. But for me, where it has worked, where it's actually been about a relationship, and actually working with brands where, yeah, you might be helping sell their product or concept, but you're doing it in a way that basically works within what you're doing. You know, so the relationships with the brands that we've worked with, where it's worked really well, is, you know, we're obviously about music and music tech. So music tech companies that we've worked with, you know, relationships have been ongoing for a number of years. And it's not that we work together constantly, but they're aware of what I do, we're aware of what they do. And every so often we get that, yeah, what are you up to? Got this idea, do you know what I mean? And then it could be, you know, it could be equipment that we can work on the project or share with other artists. But I guess what I'm trying to say is, for us, where it's worked really well is having a relationship with a brand where it's mutually beneficial, where it's not just a one-off project for a 1 week, 6 months, or even a year. It's something like this ongoing relationship, and this kind of peaks and troughs, whether it's product, whether it's financial support, whether it's visibility online or whatever. And it is this thing that's about, it's a relationship ultimately. And also something I think that's really important. I am really angry about the fact that brands tend to focus on this idea of the influencer, and the fact that the influencer is the voice of the people or the voice of the community. For me personally, that's not the way to go. I think that if you want to support a community, then you focus on supporting the community rather than the one person. Because I think in my case, where I'm trying to push an idea of the we and want resources to support the we, but brands find it easier to support the one person. And particularly, to me, that there's a tension there, because then there's this focus on the one person who can make a difference online, which I'm sure that works. It does work, of course, but I think sometimes you're missing a trick where if you're trying to support a Reprezent, or you're trying to support a Run Dem Crew or whatever, or a brands would, surely it's about supporting the organization or the culture rather than just the one person.
Yeah.
That's why.
We don't need, if you give us a basketball court, I'll actually keep the basketball court mash up and give me a coach. I don't redo the basketball court and then not give me a coach.
Yeah, that's a good way to put that. You know? You'd like to add anything?
I'm thinking, actually, I suppose. I think one of the things that just came out from what you were saying is, what's the power within the community to generate its own resources then? That's what came to mind in this conversation, because we're talking about brands, that's one way, but if we're saying that we have community and we have power, what other ways are there of us generating, resources to keep ourselves sustainable? Was a thought that flashed across my head.
Low-hanging fruit. I think a lot of times as a community, we don't look at the low-hanging fruit that we have around us. That's really easy to do. So, like with Run Dem, it's kind of whenever if we've got a bill coming in, we just go and do some merch. It's quite easy to do the merch and just kind of get that out to a global audience, But I think a lot of times I think a lot of times as well is you have communities that seem to be trying to follow the blueprint of other communities rather than really sitting down and thinking, what are our brand values? What do we stand for? Who are the type of people who we work with that aligns with what we are, what we are focused on, so the marriage is good. And then also kind of like, where are our strengths and where are our weaknesses, and what can we do differently? Because actually, when you break down marketing, it's not that hard. So it's a fundamental thing. It's not that hard to package something in a way that's attractive. You know what I mean? And we should know this because we've been marketed to since we were tiny kids. And we don't even realize. This is another reason why we get into bed with certain brands, because we don't realize they've been in our head since we were like 2 years old. They've been there, like, can't walk? Got a pair of those. Yeah, so they've already got us before they get us. And that's one of the things that I'm trying to get people to kind of break out of. And it's just to realize, like, there's so many different players that you can have conversations with. And there's so many different ways that you can do it. And your way may be kind of very, unnatural to everyone else. And they all may think it's not the way. But I guarantee you, once you do it and it works, that becomes a new blueprint. We see that with your project. It's kind of, that's why I post it. Just hook a boy up, man. It's like nice doing free marketing for you lot. You don't even realise.
I mean, what's the question that the future bubblers generationally are asking you? What's the most common thing that's coming up?
Most common one, and it actually throws me because I didn't think we'd have this question still asked 8 years in, is how can I get a record deal? Because I'm just a bit like, are we still not in this DIY headspace? Like, there's a lot you can do for yourself. There's a lot you can do to get your own, your own things in motion. But it's still quite interesting to me that I don't know if it's maybe comes from the fact that a lot of the work we do and a lot of the artists that we bring into the program are from outside of London. So there's this kind of like, because there isn't that community to plug into to feel like you can do it yourself. It's they feel like the only route is, I must sign a record deal. And it's still kind of like, like the glitz and glam of High Street Kensington. Like, it's all that kind of, do you know what I mean? I'm like, that's not a thing anymore. So I still get asked that a lot. And I guess, the response that we give is always just trying to, show them ways that they can build to a certain level to have the power in their favor. Because I feel like, when you're at that level as an artist, when you're asking that kind of question, you enter into that kind of like desperation space again we were talking about with brands, where the balance of power is not with you. And you end up signing like absolutely outrageous things that you can't get out of for years and years. And then the second most common is, how do I get a manager? And this is my, I feel like this is a wider issue that always kind of that plays on my mind, is I feel like there's so much amazing work that happens across this country to like nurture creative talent, like, like the artists, musicians, producers. But there is this kind of like weird void where no one thinks about where is the talent, industry talent of the future? Where are they coming from? How are they supported? How do they get from A to B to C to D? And you get all these amazing stories of, artists who have their best mate as their tour manager, or, and it's all like, it all feels great. But most like artists on the up are completely spun out by the business side. They don't know who to turn to and when, and who they can trust, and who's got, some alternative agenda. And I just feel like there needs to be a lot of questions asked and a lot of stuff put in place to help nurture the industry talent of the future, because we've got this problem where we've got these super like innovative, genre blurring artists, but then the options they have is to work with these super like straight-laced run-of-the-mill people that have been in the industry from like the early 90s. And they're trying to like, no, you must do it, like you were saying, like you must do it in this way, like this is the path that you must take. But we need to have, the innovation needs to be like across the industry, or they're just gonna be fighting. And it's just gonna block the true like progression, do you know what I mean? So I think that's, we try and do that a lot with Future Bubblers, where we're mentoring the artists themselves, but it's very much about, helping them find routes to someone that could become their manager. Not that they've got like a big shiny roster of people that have, signed here and toured there. Like if you grow together, it's going to be a super like fruitful and meaningful relationship.
Eunice, what about you when you're talking to young people?
Yeah, there's a lot that you've just said also that I wanted to pick up on, but I think one of the question that always comes up for me personally is, how did you start? and people really wanting to know what your journey was. And your point about the industry side, a lot of the projects and things that I work on is around developing people on the industry side. Small Green Shoots being one of those organisations that I work with and I'm passionate about, because it is, you need both sides of that. You need understanding if you want to make money from your art and your craft. So for me, it's just being able to share my story, and also for people to recognise that nobody has got the same story, and how you get in, you all have your own way that you've woven in. And I think that's another truth that needs to be told more. I think people do think that there is one way, one path. I want to be an A&R is usually the one thing that people want to do when they think about industry roles. But there's such a wide gauntlet of jobs, and it's increasingly growing. And just again, bringing it back to the topic of community, I think that's where mentoring is really important. And I think one of the questions we were discussing was about, when you don't have the answer, where do you go? And us always remembering that actually we are all young people to somebody else, if that makes sense, even at our big age. We are all young people to somebody else, and it might be in either your age or in your experience, you're a young person, and not forgetting that we've all got something to teach one another. I mean, you've just said something now, Adrian, the person that came to you and said about millennials, they just taught you something. So I think it's also all of us just remembering that we're being teachable, and we've got something to learn from others.
But every day.
Yeah.
Every day I learn something from the people I work with. But you know, we get similar questions like, how do I get a manager and how do I make a start? But then, like, I've been doing this job for 10 years, and you've got to remember that somebody becomes 18. Like, you know, every year somebody else has become 18. So the things that we think are just, is it never going to be answered? It's just that there's always someone new asking the same question a year later. And, you know, obviously...
In that decade, has like the ambitions changed though? Like, you see, you're saying that they're asking the same questions, but maybe at the beginning, people just wanted to run tunes, but now they've seen people break out from the station and go way beyond.
Yeah.
Now has that, the bar kind of been set. Like when I see like Sherelle or whatever, she comes to like Reprezent, then are they like, oh my, I want to play at all the festivals around the world now. Whereas before they just wanted to play and Reprezent.
It's so much more diversified now, you know. Yeah, for sure, so much more diversified. And you know, we've all just been talking about brand projects, and that's just exploded in the last kind of 5 to 7 years more than ever before. Going, you know, down to, you know, Instagram users and influencers, and to nano influencers and God knows what else. So it's, you know, I think people breaking into either music or radio or media in some form, there's so many more different pathways they can go down to actually make bread and butter money. You know, it's so yeah, that it's definitely changed.
I think asking yourself what type of artist you want to be is a really important question, because whereas before I think it was just like, you know, you're just looking at big rock acts and you just want to be big. Whereas now I'm looking at it and I'm like, okay, well, really, all you really need is like a fan base of 100 people and you're good. You know, you can you can live nice if you're clever with these small fan bases. And I think for a lot of new people coming in, they haven't quite worked out that there are many different ways to be an artist, to have a voice in this industry. But it's about you being very honest with yourself about what your aspirations really are, and being true to that, and also realizing that at some point you might change. You know, you might start being like, I just want to be super underground, and then actually I kind of do want to play Wembley.
Yeah, it's like what you want to spend your time doing, like, is a good proxy. It's like a lot of people say, say like if you want to be a DJ, for example, I'm like, do you want to, if you wanted to be a global touring DJ, the things that go into that, do you want to be in Bratislava on a Thursday night? Do you want to be in Stockholm on a Friday? Do you want to miss your mum's birthday on Saturday and then get home at 11 p.m. on Sunday? Do you, like, every week, do you want to do that? If you ask someone that, they'll probably say no, but you angle your whole career and existence and energy around trying to get to that place where that's even possible. And it's super interesting when people get to the point where they thought they were dreaming about, and they're like, oh, this isn't what I thought. But it's because you don't think of the actual result. You're thinking of the maybe who that person is, or like I want to be like that person, not realizing that all those sacrifices that have been made to kind of get there.
I mean, as someone comes from a wellness angle, I retrained as a yoga teacher, and one of the things I learned was this idea about celebrating and enjoying being in the present. Because I think a lot of times as an artist, what happens is you start this stuff in your bedroom and then it starts going well and you don't realize that it's all happening for you, but you don't realize because your natural inclination as a musician is like, okay, that was a tune I made yesterday, but this is the tune that's going to better that tune. As a DJ, everyone's freaking out. They're loving the tune you're playing now, but you're thinking like 3 tunes ahead. And I think it's really easy to have these magical moments happening and you're so caught up in the moment that you don't even realize. And I think it's really important that, we teach young people who are coming into it how to be present. And then also, the question I get asked a lot is kind of, how can I get to still do it when I'm your age?
Oh,
Which I think is a really important thing, because I think a lot of people don't realize is you can't, when you see these artists and they're like 60 odd and they're still smashing it, there's so much that goes on into getting them to that point that is never ever spoken about and is so, so important. And when I look at the kind of schedule that some of these, like a lot of the younger DJs, I'm just like, it's unsustainable. You're not going to get out of your 30s with that schedule. Not going to happen, And it's a real shame because I think what happens is that this young generation of people are coming through, but they're burning out and they're going into other fields before we really get a chance to see how magical the true potential or the change that they could bring. Because they also always get to the point and they're like, I'm out, I'm done. I'm going to go and open a restaurant. I'm out, you know what I mean? And then so then we're left with the old relics, still doing things in the same old way.
Or new people starting from scratch. So it's like when you're hot, so let's say like a hot act artist and they're doing 8 gigs a month, if they were only doing 4 that whole time, then they would have got to make another record and they would have got to do this collaboration and that thing, but there's not even the space and time because you're trying to do the most. Tony, I want to get to you on this question because you see people at all like parts of their career, I guess, like people sharing music with you, coming to workshops, learning things, and then going to action it. When people have come, learn something from you, say like these kind of creative workshops that you've been doing, what is the next stage? They've made the song. What is that question what is the next question? Like, what do they do with it?
How do I master? So that's an interesting question. I think so for me, it's always really beautiful to see, particularly, let's look at it from 2 angles. Let's look at it from, say, the workshop or the music education angle. It's always really good to see how people grow and evolve as an artist or as a music producer. I guess same with you with artists, or same with you as DJs. See people who are coming for a drop-in workshop, and then 6 months down the line, they're like banging it out, And it's really, really beautiful to see how people grow and evolve as artists and producers in my case. But it's almost like once they have the skills, it's like, then what? Do you know what I mean? I know how to make the music. I know how to make that, I know how to shape that bass line that I've always wanted to know. I've known how to program drums in a particular kind of way. And it's almost like we spend a lot of time nurturing people, but then at some point there's this conversion where they've got to be in the industry, and then it's then not about their music and talent anymore. It's about other stuff. And for me, that's a really vulnerable moment, because then once they're in the industry, once you've records are mastered, if you've got someone to master it, or you master it yourself, or use an application, once it's in the outside world, it's beyond you. And then it's literally, what is success? And I think for me, one of the biggest challenges we have is understanding what success is. And it's, of course, success can mean different things to different people, but ultimately success is playing at, festivals, or having a record that everyone jumps up and down to at a festival, or whatever. But actually it takes a lot to get to that. And it's not just about your music that gets you that success. So I think emotionally, helping people, supporting people through that transition where they're enabled, they have the skills to do that fantastic DJ set or to make that banger, right? But actually, what happens if that banger doesn't get played on radio? What happens if that banger doesn't get picked up by a label? Then what? And the thing is, I think it's about helping people have the confidence to push through And as Charlie mentioned, look at ways to kind of build your audience, nurture that 100 people who are interested in what you're doing, and look at your connection to music, or your connection to DJing, or connection to singing as this kind of long-term, proposition. And it's this thing that's going to be in your life for as long as you want it. And it is going to be peaks and troughs. There are going to be times when people jump on your stuff and everyone's talking about you, but there'll be definitely times where people don't care at all. And then how do you navigate that? So my thing is that, take the in terms of attention and success, take the rough with the smooth. If people are interested in what you're doing, wicked. If opportunities come from when you release music or share it with people, great. But equally, if people do not, don't take it to heart. Just focus on being yourself, being innovative, and in my case, just helping people to basically take those risks technologically and compositionally in ways that bring in new music and and push the music envelope as much as it can.
I think as well, you have to be prepared to hand some of the people you work with over to somebody else for the next stage, which is, I do that a lot of rep where, we'll have a DJ that's doing really well. There's one, Asiyama, who's on Radio 1, and me and Naina, who represent Legend, also awesome DJ in her own right. We knew Jerry was doing a show at Rep on a particular day, and we knew that Toddler T wanted to come in to do a guest DJ slot. And so we made it so strategic that Jerry was DJing when Toddler walked through. And Toddler looked at Jerry, he was like, 17 at the time? And he was with a mate, and he just went, I've seen the next DJ, he said. And it was right. And Jerry ended up being mentored by Toddler. And he was out of rep. And he knows that he can come back at any time and ask her, for support in anything. But for me and Naina to hand Jerry over was he's going to be fine, because then Toddler really helped him with his Radio 1 work. And it was just so great to be able to pass a young person over to another mentor in a way, and boom, then the next one's coming through. It's
especially important when you're working with young people in these communities, because I think people don't realise it's everyone's excited, but my son's 15, he just started DJing. All I get every day is okay, so back to back, Charlie Dark and Junior Dark together. I'm okay, because everyone's excited about him because he's 15. And I've worked with, when I was teaching a lot of poets and working in poetry and creative writing, the hardest part was when they suddenly wake up and realise I'm not young anymore, or people aren't excited by the fact that I'm a 18-year-old who lives in the state writing poetry. They don't care anymore. And making that transition is really, really hard for people, because then you are out in the real world and you suddenly realise why it's called the music industry, not the music playtime. And I think, again, one thing I'd say when I work with young people, because I mentor a lot of young DJs and older DJs who pretend I don't mentor them because they don't want the shame. You know what I mean? But for a lot of the younger DJs, what I say to them is kind of you have to be really honest about yourself, about whether you're really built for this industry. Because it is shiny and is attractive and it can be amazing. But I just truly do believe that it's not for everyone. And it's very important for you to because you can waste a lot of time and it's not happen. And suddenly you wake up and it's you are 14, you're still talking about your mixtape that no one really is going to be listening to,
Yeah, but I also think it's about understanding what you want from the industry. Do you know what I mean? I think, there's a lot of focus on, people who are successful and, who have notoriety, but there's different forms of notoriety. Something I really enjoy about, meeting people who make music, particularly at CDR, is that there are different kinds of people. But ultimately, there are a lot of people who are, maybe in their either 20s or early 30s or even older, who come to CDR to bring the tracks they're working on, but they've got a day job. Do you know what I mean? And they've got kids. Do you know what I mean? Or they're in the long term, whatever it is, right? And they've got that room in their house that's basically got their equipment. And they make beats, whatever the genre is, and they bring it down to CDR. And at CDR, they had this connection to music making and creativity that feeds them, feeds their soul, feeds their identity, right? And they may decide to release the music themselves, or they may decide to, whatever happens. But I guess the point I'm trying to make is this: I think there's something about just, you know, having this space or having this opportunity to be connected to creativity, and it doesn't have to always be loaded with success. It doesn't have, well, you know, notoriety. There's different forms of notoriety. And I think that, you know, again, getting back to what I was saying before, I think we've actually lost a lot of amazing, talented people because of this idea of they're not successful or they're failures, right? So then, you know, and then, you know, because they don't become successful in a particular time span, they stop making music or stop DJing or get disillusioned, right? And I think that there's something around, you know, with young people, I think there's something about them owning the fact that they are passionate about this particular art form and encouraging them to just keep going and to keep growing and evolving, both technically and in terms of and also just in terms of their understanding of the industry. But don't, you know, try not to be wooed by industry, you know, because ultimately, if you're, it's almost like it's like this. What do you call it? It's like a, what's that thing? Moth to a flame or something. You know, once you go, whoa, you kind of lose all sense of reality once the industry grabs you, right? Which of course it's, you know, we all know what that can look like, and it's fantastic, of course. But at the same time, you know, everyone has a window. You know, everyone has a window of time. You know, and as I said, with this whole peaks and troughs thing, you know, being mindful of that, but also just, you know, if you want to be connected to creativity and music, art, in the long term, it's about, you know, you having ownership of that and creating an infrastructure around yourself that basically allows you to keep doing that. You know?
Every time you speak to her, you make me think of something else. I think something else that's come out of my mind, of my thinking is, I think it's our responsibility. I think people aren't honest enough really about how hard it is and what the realities are. And I think you can only answer that question of what do you want out of it if you actually know what the options are. And that comes down to the rest of us to be really honest about what our journeys have been and what the options are. And that actually you can have a day job and you can just make it music because you enjoy it, or you can try and be a superstar, or actually you could just not do it and be something else. I think that we need to be sharing those stories with young people more often and really stretching their thinking to say, you've seen the shiny thing, but actually real life wise, this is what life is. It's not always easy. And I'm going to scare you a bit by saying this, but these are all of your options. And it doesn't have to be music or something creative. It can be something else, or it could be both. I think it's up to us to be really real with young people in that sense. Because, yeah, I'm trying to think back to when I first started. I was just doing stuff because I was passionate. I wasn't necessarily, I mean, I was actually quite focused about what I was doing next, but I don't think I had the full picture, and I might not have even grasped it if people told me anyway. So I think we just have to keep reiterating what being an adult is like, really, and actually these are all of your options for shaping a life.
And also I think on an accessibility tip, I'm noticing that actually, Tony, you used the word window, like, and everyone's got this kind of fixation of you have to have made it by a certain time. But I just feel like, you know, it's actually a real privilege and a luxury for a lot of young people to have the time and money to make music in that kind of like free way. And there's a whole like demographic of young people that have to go out and do their shifts in JD Sports and pay their mum housekeeping. They can't like just let it all spill out of them every day when it comes, you know what I mean, when it washes over them. So it's like, you know, a lot of artists are coming into this kind of like professional music space a lot later than, you know, the press makes you want to feel is acceptable, because they have like real life shit to deal with. Like they have to do stuff, they have to pay bills, they have to, you know, entertain their mum and dad's ideas of getting a proper job. Like they have to go through those motions. And I feel like having the window is a very personal thing. Like it's so easy, you know, we spoke about the internet and, you know, online stuff earlier on, and it's like, it opens up that gateway to like having instant validation or instant, like, I must be here at this point, because it's so easy to compare. But, you know, it's such a personal thing. Like it's, you know, when you get into that headspace is one issue, but when you have the like financial viability or, you know, just the practical opportunity to come into that headspace and afford your first controller, like it's different for everyone. And it's it's too easy to think, oh, you're 18, you're absolutely past it. Like, give up, go and study accountancy. Do you know what I mean?
I don't think there is a window, if I can say that. I don't think there is a window. I think, yes, there is to some degree, but again, it comes down to what you want for your life, I think. You can be anything at most ages. It's just you might not be able to be everything, or it might have to take a different shape. I don't like the term having windows because I feel it's limiting. I think you just have to think that actually there's some compromises I might have to make, but I can do anything.
I mean, I agree with you, and I agree with you. Because what I actually think is, it's maybe not necessarily a window, but actually there's a period of time when it's easier. You know, that's the thing. You know, I know is kind of like, when I rock up to a rave with my records, as a 51-year-old man, the kids were like, what's going on here? You know what I mean? If I was 17 and playing the music that I play on vinyl now, my career trajectory would be very, very different. Because it'd be like exciting. This is why everyone's like, we don't really want you to DJ, we want your son to DJ. You know what I mean? So, but yeah, I think it's very important for people to give themselves a timeline. Because otherwise, otherwise I just think that, you know, everyone's got this idea. It's kind of like, oh, I'm going to give up my day job to become a musician, and then I'm going to become a better musician because I've got more time. And I just find, you know, because you're not now on the bus, interacting with customers, doing the stuff you don't want to do, you're not getting the same ideas that you were getting for album 1. That's why album 2 just kind of taking much longer and maybe is not as good as the first one. And I think it's important for people, you know, to kind of realise that the outside world is really important. Is a really important part of the music making and the music survival process, and having an understanding of that. Because you get a lot of people during the pandemic. You saw it. It's kind of, what have you been doing for the last 3 years? I've been DJing, mate. What are you gonna do now? I don't know. You know, you're gonna get on Instagram, Insta Live. No, mate, that's not real DJing. And now they're really like, they've kind of checkmate themselves into a corner. And so I think it's just giving yourself a timeline.
When you say timeline, I just want to unpack what does that mean for you when you say timeline? Is it timeline to get your goals done? Is it timeline to, what does that mean for you?
I think it's regularly checking in with yourself and holding yourself accountable for the fact that you've chosen this dream.
Yeah.
That may not happen. Mm-hmm. That I know has a very deep effect on other people. You know, it's like the 45-year-old music producer with 3 kids. It's like, that's really impacting the family. You've got to be aware of that. And a lot of times you just go into it and it's like, I'm just making music. I do whatever I want. I just think it's actually just about giving yourself a timeline so that you're basically like, I'm working towards achieving this. And if it doesn't happen, then I check in with myself again to be like, why didn't that happen? What can I do differently as I keep moving forward?
So it's more of an accountability checkpoint rather than if I don't do it by this point, I'm a failure. But more of an accountability check itself. Yeah. Do you know what? One of the things that comes out from this as well for me, and just about community, is self-awareness. I think that's really important in this for life. But I think having self-awareness is so important. Yeah. Which I think
good musician practices.
Yeah.
I always say this to people. I never used to sleep because Nas said, sleep is the cousin of death. I'm like, okay, well, I want to be in this music industry thing. And my favorite rapper has said that sleep is something that we don't do. Yeah. So we must grind and we must, burn candle at all ends. That's unsustainable. Yeah. I remember talking to Digo and it's like 10 o'clock in the morning. I'm like, what are you doing? He's like, oh yeah, man, just been in the studio for 3 hours. It was mind blowing to me that people were going to studio in the early daylight hours. And I think actually, when you look at those people who've got good musician working practices, they just kind of have got the system around them that means that they can flourish and be great at what they do. And I think that's really important, that for young people coming in, that they understand that it's kind of, you have to put that in, in order to get to where you're trying to get to. Otherwise it becomes more, what I realise is this, it's like, if your dad is like, MD of Sony, you got an easy path. But for a lot of us, we're coming in cold and we're not realising that the playing field is not level. So the more things you can do to level the playing field so that at least you can fight fairly and get a fair chance, I encourage people to do.
I think we've kind of focused on young people and other people and what everyone else should be doing or where everyone else is at. It's like bringing it back to ourselves,
Yep.
our own self-awareness,
Yeah.
self-accountability. Like what are some of the, I guess, the challenges, especially when you're talking about people behind the scenes. No one asks about us. No one asks if we're okay.
No, no one does. No one asks about us.
Yeah. I don't think it's, no one cares. Everyone just assumes that we're okay because we're there supporting other people. We're there doing the workshops. We're there putting in that time with the Zooms. You're there supporting young people, but there's an assumption that we're all just fine and we're going to get on with it, or we've got the resilience to keep going. Like I guess, do you have to have that conversation with your artists that you work with? Like, hey, I've got this going on. I can't do that right now. Like, what is that even like for you?
I think, yeah, I mean, you know, the two artists that I manage, we have, you know, they're quite long-term relationships now, and it's very much, there's like, you know, that mutual understanding of life isn't just the music that we're doing, like there's other shit going on. So I will very happily send out, you know, this is going on, I'm uncontactable for this period of time or this many days or whatever. And also every year I try and go away for like 5 consecutive days where I'm like, I am not gonna look at my emails. Like it's so important to me to just have that, because with management especially, it's so holistic. Like there's so much that you're juggling all the time and everything's interconnected. So you have to completely remove yourself from everything to let your like head and soul recover. Because otherwise you can always just like find that little thing that you can like, you know, interfere with or make happen. So I mean, yeah, it is. I know. I also find, I don't think it's spoken about enough, management as well. I actually find it quite lonely at times, because obviously you're responding a lot of the time to like, you know, artists' kind of whims and desires and ideas and things that they want to make happen. And sometimes you want to have that kind of like soundboard to be like, just to talk through stuff, but not with the artist. Do you know what I mean? Like to kind of have that, like, let's see where this decision could lead us or this piece of advice could take us. And obviously managers are all so busy, so you don't want to be like, yo, you've got like 5 minutes, because you know they never have. So a lot of the time you just have to, you know, just get through it. But it is quite you know, and a lot of the other parts of the artist's team are actual like teams as well. So like a whole label team where you know they're like riffing off each other and having all of these ideas. But, you know, I know there's management teams, but like the way that I work, it's just, you know, me, myself and I. So sometimes I do miss that kind of, you know, who else can I speak to that's exactly on my part of this conversation and like level off.
Do you have anyone in mind who that could be?
You know, there's a whole bunch of people that I know that work in management, but like I say, it's all, because they do it to me as well. They'll be like, can I do this? And I'm like, no, I'm about to like announce an album in an hour. Like it's the worst time ever. And a lot of those things are kind of like, they're like instant things that you have to talk through. So it's really hard to kind of have that perfect alignment of when there's someone available to kind of talk it through. But you know, we get there.
Eunice, what about you? Your kind of personal challenges at the moment when navigating all this?
I think it's people really valuing how much effort it takes to do your job. Sometimes I was having me my good friend of mine who does a similar thing to me, produces events. Where people don't really get it sometimes. They don't really get how much it takes to do the behind the scenes stuff, how much effort. I mean, in terms of events, apparently it's the top 5 most stressful jobs in the world, next to being a brain surgeon. And you're doing like 12-hour days, you're responding to lots of people, you're managing lots of people, you're being creative at the same time. So it's a lot. And I think that other side, the behind the scenes side, does definitely need some focus, and for us also to acknowledge the effort that it takes, and have these conversations with people, even if it's a different stream, because everything you've just said, I'm like, oh, yeah. Yeah, I'm like, and I'm not a manager, and I respect managers because it is all encompassing, but I appreciate that because in a role like mine, I am managing everybody in that sense. So I get that. So I think it's just, again, self-awareness, acknowledgement of how much effort it takes, and doing yourself a service, forgetting everybody else, expecting anyone else to kind of look after you, but doing yourself a service by taking the space and time you need to look after yourself, and also be remunerated for the work that you do properly. That's very important in our industry as well. So yeah, that's kind of where I'm at, I think, in terms of thinking about my role.
Adrian, like I know that must be hard for you because everyone's just focused on the young people in Brixton.
You just get exhausted, innit? Just knackered. Like I feel like I haven't had that recalibration after a pandemic. Like I haven't had that moment of being somewhere far away with no phone, just going like, you know, excuse the French, how the fuck did we get through that? You know, there's that point where I'm driving around London at the beginning of a pandemic with a car full of radio kit, swapping kit between people's houses to make sure that they could broadcast from home, and it was insane, and all the mad financial stress, like, you know, keeping a radio station afloat on a creative tip when all the young people are basically in some really brutal, like physically located in places that aren't great, and mentally as well. And yeah, coming out of that and then just not having yet had that 2 weeks away, that's kind of...
You think that's all it would take?
No, no. But it's just that moment to almost kind of reflect on like how, you know, the last kind of couple of years particularly, like, you know, how they've kind of taken it out of us a lot, I think. I'm done with Zoom. Like, I'm done. Like, if you're in the same city as me, don't give me a Zoom link unless it's something very minor. Yeah. Like,
just pick up the phone.
Like, I don't mind traveling. I'm going to come and meet you because, like, it's all yeah. Like,
if you've been speaking to someone for 2 years on Zoom,
yeah,
and they're in London, then you need to go.
Yeah. So, you know, I think, you know, I'm good, but yeah, just knackered. But I think I've been that for 20 years. But, you know, a radio station runs from what, 8:30 in the morning, closes at 11 at night, and you've got 150 young people. Do you know what I mean? It's like, it's going to be knackering. So it's life. It's life.
Yeah, I mean, I was definitely feeling the burnout before the pandemic came. And so the pandemic arrived at just the right time. I was happy that, you know, we had a little bit of a pause. But I do feel now that actually one of the things that's been hard is actually reintegrating myself into the world. Because, you know, it's kind of, I'm one of those guys who's like, meet up? Yeah, let's just do Zoom. let's get Zoom on. So actually it's been good kind of getting back into, you know, the world again. But I think one thing that I've realised is less gigs for more money, and being very, very selective about who I work with. And I almost look at DJing now a bit like playing the piano. I'm not trying to be a concert pianist, but that doesn't mean that when I walk past my piano, I don't want to give it a little tinkle. And I think a lot of times for us, we came into the industry at a time when it was such a no-go industry to be in, particularly if you're like the child of an immigrant. So it was almost this idea like, if you're going to go into the music industry and you don't want to be a lawyer or a doctor, then you better make sure that you're successful. And not only you're successful, but you're a household name. Because I need to be able to call home and tell them what you're doing. You know, and that's, again, is really important because, you know, for me, it's kind of, I've had some great, amazing highs, but I haven't considered them highs because my parents haven't considered them high enough. So dealing with that's been really important. And then this is our idea of kind of working with the right people and just being patient and confident enough in your own talents to be like, if I turn this situation down, that's okay, because another one will come. Yeah, the power of no, really important. And also the power of kind of not looking at what other people are doing and comparing myself. Because when I look at like the 20-year-olds and they're kind of, you know, they're doing 20 festivals and you only do 5, you're like, I should be doing 20 festivals. But you're like, actually, you know what? The 20-year-olds, you should be doing the 20. Yeah. You should do 20 festivals. That should be you. I need to do less. And that's been really, you know, been really important. But I really do wish that the music industry as a whole had taken this year off. Not by force of pandemic, but actually like we are taking a year off to recalibrate and come back with some new ideas and new ways of thinking. Because we said we were going to do that, but we couldn't really do that because we were trying to like save our businesses. Yes. But now we've got, you know, this time Because I just really do think that people haven't realised, like, I played Glastonbury and we're out here this year. Glastonbury and the Gram, obviously everyone knows Glastonbury. My mum knows the Glastonbury, but not the best experience as a performer to go and play at. We Out Here Festival, absolutely amazing. But one of the reasons I think it's because when you look at the lineup, it's like the lineup of underrated people who aren't really getting light anywhere else. But you put them all together and they all under-promise and over-perform. And that's really important.
It's not just another gig for them.
It's just not another gig for them, yeah. And so I think actually the industry could learn a lot about looking in these other areas where you're going to get people who are going to under-promise and over-perform.
And make it special, like for
yeah, because it's unsustainable as it is at the moment. You're just like, well, if I don't see you at that festival, I'll see him at this one. If I don't see him here, I'll see him there. Or he's going to have a residency here. And it's just a bit kind of stale, which is no surprise that a lot of young people are kind of turning away from it. They don't want to go. They don't want to be in those environments anymore. They want to go and listen to Future Bubblers now because it's a bit cooler than listening to, you know, Cake in Your Face.
Yeah. Tony?
What was the question?
I'll angle it slightly different. I guess like what we've been speaking about the bigger community thing, but not about Tony.
Yeah.
Does anyone ask if you're all right?
So, yes, there are people who ask me if I'm okay, particularly recently. But I think for me, one of the biggest challenges is navigating identity. Because I think that, when you have been in industry for a while, it's almost like you're a chameleon. You start off as one entity. So in my case, I was a programmer. Then I became a member of a band, and then I became a producer, remixer, and then I became somebody who has I've got an organization now. Really? Okay. I need some help. Oh, so now I'm employing you. Oh, PAYE. So you kind of start off as an artist, and then you end up just being this. This person who does lots of different kinds of things. I didn't go management training. Everything I've learned in my entire career has been on a whim. Everything, right? A little bit of YouTube, but on a whim. And I'm following my gut and my heart, following my instinct, essentially. That's been my journey. But no one told me that, things that I'm really passionate about, and all these strands of work and relationships and responsibilities, including mentoring, including being a father, including being a long-term relationship. All these things are who I am, but no one tells you how to manage it all. Particularly when some things can be really demanding, like pandemics, and suddenly you've got to keep your business afloat and make sure your family's in check and make sure, all these other things. You're just juggling lots of different things. No one teaches you how to navigate those things. And particularly if you're someone who is very driven, like we all are, the last thing we're going to do is ask for help. The last thing we're going to do is delegate. That's the last thing we're going to do. So learning actually that, I have this identity that has multiple identities, and they all need care and attention. And they also need space, to think, space to strategize, space to rest, But then more importantly, if you're working on projects that you're passionate about and you draw community towards you, you'll have people who are just as passionate as you, and and bring them in, give them part of what you're doing, whether it's a responsibility in the organization or giving them some of the organization. Because I think particularly when you're running a community and you're running an entity, it's bigger than you, and in the words of, a certain band, it's bigger than hip hop, So I really think about that a lot nowadays, and this idea that, to keep things going and to keep me sane, and also just to share, the enthusiasm. It's really important to have space to, remind myself of all the things that I do and to stay healthy, but also to really lean on people who are just as passionate as me, and know that if I'm not around, for whatever reason, there are people around me who can carry the baton and actually do better than me in ways that I can't imagine.
Oh. I want to leave this in optimistic place, and I guess like what we've all got out of the last couple of years, like have there been skills, maybe things that you've learned about yourself that you, I guess, never thought would have been possible, or something that has changed about you fundamentally that you could be like, if the pandemic never happened, or if situations didn't dramatically change, wouldn't have kind of forced you to kind of take a look at, you know what I'm saying? So that can be, you can take that as broad as you like. Maybe it's nothing, maybe it's even just survival, getting to this point is the achievement.
It's one of the things, like when you were talking about community, I was talking about being a community radio station. Like we were up and running from our presenters' houses before the BBC. And you know, as a team, like this is not just an Adrian thing. There's a small team of staff and a big team of volunteers. Like that first, it was the week before even Boris had proper gone, you're staying at home, because most of the stations shut the week before. Like G over at Rinse was like, we're out, and Bellamy we're out. And so by the time this lockdown was announced, we were up and running from home. And I got an email from Mark, who was in charge of One Extra at the time, just saying, bloody hell, well done. And that was like, you can take the community and polish it up now as a word and put it in front of community radio, because actually, you know, we problem solved the shit out of it, do you know what I mean? So yeah, that kind of made me realise we were actually maybe better than we thought we were, which was, you know, a super positive thing to come out of it.
Thank you. Charlie?
I think the pandemic just made me rediscover my love of music, and partly has helped me find my purpose. And I kind of really needed that, because I think I'd kind of given up on music. I felt like there wasn't a place for me anymore. So I'd taken my foot off the gas, and being forced to kind of set my decks up again, you know, despite the biggest argument that myself and my missus have ever had, you know, but being forced to take my decks out from underneath the sofa and actually give them dedicated time just made me fall in love with music again, my record collection, what I've done in the past, you know, what I hope to achieve in the future. But actually it just kind of made me realise that it's something that makes me happy, it's something that I need to do, and that's okay. Because I think I'd always looked at music as like a guilty secret. It's like something I was maybe wasting time on and having to explain it to other people. Whereas now it's kind of like, yeah, I'm a DJ, that's what I do.
Run tune, yeah.
It's kind of like, and then, you know, if you haven't kind of if you don't understand it by now, then you're never going to.
Yeah.
And that's okay. Yeah.
Man. Like, yeah, I don't ever think I've processed pandemic. I've not had the time. I guess looking back on just the whole experience, it made me really kind of connect with all of the artists I was working with across Future Bubblers, the artists I manage, on a much more kind of like just the who are you as a whole person kind of level. Like there was a lot more openness, I think, about I'm finding this hard, or I can't do this now, and like both ways. And I feel like that's kind of moved with us into the post-pandemic world, that people are a lot more open about when they're having a shit day, or when they're not in the headspace to deal with this, or can we push this, you know, a little bit further down the line. And it just, I think it just kind of made it all feel, I just felt so much more connected to the young people that I was working with. And it kind of moved it from that kind of, this is an industry business thing, that we were kind of in that, you know, when you're in in the rhythm of it, before you get to step back and just think, actually, at the end of the day, like, we're dealing with like humans with like feelings and needs and things outside of music. So it made it all feel a bit more bigger picture to me.
Okay, Eunice?
I think it just reinforced things that I really value even more so, which is my peace and my freedom. And it really just, I think, made me even more grateful than I was before. And it's actually made me want to have even more fun with my life. So, as you were saying, Adrian, about just having a moment to recalibrate, I made it my mission, and it has been at the end of 2021 that I'm going to have fun this year, and I'm going to have space in my life this year. and I'm going to go on holiday and I'm going to do fun things and I'm going to embrace the power of no. That's definitely something that's come a lot stronger for me this year. So yeah, those are some of the things that have come out from that period, is having space for myself. And actually one of my mentors asked me a really thought-provoking question, which was what does success look like for me? And I went away and sat and thought about it, of course. And what I got back was that it's a slower pace. It's not a less ambitious pace, but it's a slower pace, and it's a more spacious pace for me. So that's what I'm working on and what it's brought for me.
Thank you.
Echoing everything that's missing here, but I also think that not that we haven't forgotten, but we've forgotten that the pandemic was intense, man. We lost some people.
Yep.
We lost some people. We lost some soldiers, man. We lost some people, and they're not here anymore, because of this pandemic. And I think, apart from Ty and there's others, of course, we all know some people who have gone particularly from the music industry. I think it's made me realise that and I knew this before, but this pandemic really hit it home that we're only on this planet for a short time, right? So apart from using it as a time to reflect, of course, as a lot of us did on all aspects of our lives, but it also just reminded me why I do what I do. Why I'm on this planet. Why am I spending time doing what I do? And apart from the fact that if it makes me happy, that's really important. That I feel that I'm connected to what I do, and I'm doing it for reasons that matter to me. But also, it means that I want that to extend in the people that I work with, and I have no time for people who are going to mess me about, who have got agendas that aren't aligned with mine. I didn't have time before, but I do not have time for that now and forevermore, because what I'm doing, what we are doing, is really special, and it's authentic, and it matters a lot, particularly to the people that we work with, the generations of people that we work with, and that can't be fucked with, basically. So moving out of the pandemic, I'm more determined to keep doing what I'm doing with people who have shared this same vision and ideas, and want to take risks in the same way I do, but without agendas. And if you've got an agenda, I'd rather not work with you.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you to everyone, because obviously I've met and worked with everyone in some small degrees, big degrees, or just spoken to, we just DM'd on Instagram.
Yeah.
We've been on email chains with 8 people CC'd.
Yeah, of course.
Adrian, we just met just now, but we've been back and forth a few times, and all of the Reprezent people have coming into my universe and stuff. Tony, we've worked. You've helped me with with a lot of things over time. And Eunice, we've had the conversation via AEI here,
Zoom,
via Zoom here. So we've had we're all orbiting. I don't want to use a word to be right. We all are orbiting the same universe, right? Mm-hmm. And trying to make it a better place in our kind of communities, families, people around us, life. Even just people passing through this thing. So I'm really grateful for this conversation, and it's awesome to take it in. So thank you.
Thank you. I'm going to clap for you.